And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 86th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, April 30th, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. We will if you want to catch our live broadcast Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m., visit us on our YouTube page or our website. If you missed that live broadcast, you can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts. You can listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at The Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ. Subscribe and turn that bell on so you can get our episode whenever we come out with one. All that information is in our website, indianahq.com. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. On the docket for tonight, we normally don't have an episode that has so many topics, but there are just so many little things that we need to discuss tonight. We're going to start with the recent updates in recruiting because it's that time of year, even though last week's show was almost completely dedicated to recruiting. We'll briefly touch up on that before talking some important baseball as the men's team is heating up and consistently heating up. There was also an NFL draft this weekend, and former Hoosiers are now on some new pro teams. Indiana football got their highest ranked recruit for the second straight year, and alcohol sales will now be available for purchase for those 21 and older at Memorial Stadium starting this year. And that does have some significance to the program and the fans potentially. But here with me tonight, the whole gang is finally back together and shooting on all cylinders, much like this IU baseball team is at the moment. But Nathan, how are you doing tonight after your Cubs game last week?
Yeah, hello everyone. I missed you guys at Wrigley Field last Tuesday night. It was fun. It was a good time. The Cubs won. If y'all don't know, on the side, I'm a Cubs fan. So it was great to see that. I was listening to you guys later on in the week last week, and I liked what I was hearing about recruiting, and it helped me sort of track what was going on with IU basketball. So it was all good fun, and I can't wait to see how our episode goes tonight because, like you said, it's just a smorgasbord of topics that we're going to be able to talk about.
Yep, exactly. So to kick us off, Matt is going to start out by saying just a little something about the recruits Indiana has offered this past week. So how are you doing tonight? And tell us a little bit about those recruits Archie has offered for this Hoosier basketball team this past week.
Sure, I'm doing great. If I sound a little like I have no energy, that's because I just played like 2.5 hours, 3 hours of basketball. So I apologize. My legs are killing me. Anyways, moving on. So this week, Archie Miller offered three people. The first person he offered was Anthony Leal. Of course, I think I've mentioned Anthony Leal multiple times on the podcast previously. If you don't know who he is, he's a 6'5" shooting guard from emphasis on shooting guard from Bloomington South High School in Bloomington, Indiana. He shoots the three as well as anybody I've seen as a high school recruit in a while. He's a sniper, but that's about it for his game. But he's a shooter, and we could always use shooters, especially after the last year. Second person offered was Trey Galloway, somebody who I have mentioned previously on the podcast about when we were looking ahead to recruits to offer. If you don't know who he is, he's also a 6'5" shooting guard, but he's from the Culver Academy, from Culver, Indiana. He's been on IU's radar for multiple years now. He's kind of taken a tumble in the recruiting rankings. At one point, he was in like the top 50s of his class. He's now down to like the 200s on 24/7. But I expect him to climb back up again close to the 100 range. He's very good at getting to the basket. He's a good dribbler, good at finishing around the rim. His jump shot is coming along, but is not quite there yet. But I'm sure he'll get there, and he'd be a great 4-year player. And then finally, the other person that we offered is what is his name? He's from Pennsylvania, and his name is
talking about Matt Cross.
Yeah, Matt Cross. There we go. Sorry, Matt Cross. I can't forget the guy with my own name. Anyways, yes, Matt Cross was just offered yesterday. I have not seen much of him. I actually had no idea who he was before we saw that he was offered, but he's in the mid 200s. so far in the recruiting rankings. So he's a 3-star recruit. And he goes to school at, I believe, Connecticut, a boarding school in Connecticut. He's a sniper, like great shooter, just like Anthony Leal. He's 6'7", plays the power forward position. I don't know. He's somebody to look forward to. He's probably he was one of the people that really impressed this weekend on the Adidas circuit. Or is it Under Armour? Under Armour Adidas. I cannot find him right now, and it's really pissing me off. But anyways, he really impressed this weekend, obviously in front of the staff, and so they gave him a offer. So yeah, I mean, good for Matt Cross, good for IU. We could always use the shooting, and especially somebody who's plays the power forward position.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into him either. I know he's a 3-star recruit. He's not too highly ranked up there because I started to look into him just a little bit. But like you said, he impressed this past weekend, and I think he started to turn some heads, which is why it seems like Indiana was the one to offer him first. But let's kick it over to Matt.
Sorry. He's 228 nationally ranked. He's a power forward, and he's from Woodstock Academy in Beverly, Massachusetts. There we go. Sorry, I just fixed it. Oh, thank you. Anyways, and he was on the EYBL circuit. I got that all wrong. I apologize, everybody. Anyways,
it was like 2 weeks in a row, Matt. Well,
I know. I'm peak form tonight, guys. Peak form.
That's all right. So let's kick it over to Nathan, since he didn't get to talk at all about recruiting last week. So do you have any thoughts just about recruiting in general, even some Lester or Trendon stuff? And what are your thoughts on Anthony Leal, Trey Galloway, and Matt Cross being offered basically the past couple days?
Yeah, I mean, it's the wonderful world of recruiting, isn't it? I mean, you shoot about 30 or 40 shots in the hope of landing, 3 or 4. It's a very complicated sort of part of being a basketball coach, I think. While some of us may be on the couch yelling during basketball games, oh, why didn't you run this play? Or why didn't you dump the ball inside? I don't think any of us are really aware of the physical toll and the difficulty of recruiting in general, and especially this time of year where there are so many different twists and turns in the whole scheme of things. You're balancing the NBA draft, and you're balancing graduate transfers and other transfers who are willing to sit out a year. And there's just a wide variety of stuff, coaching changes. All these things are sort of impacting the entire recruiting spectrum. As far as Leal, Galloway, and Cross are concerned, these guys are all 2020 recruits. So these guys wouldn't start playing for another couple of seasons. The two guys that I'm going to focus on are Anthony Leal and Trey Galloway. They're in-state kids. Leal is in town, Bloomington South High School currently. Trey Galloway from Culver, which is closer to my neck of the woods in northern Indiana. I'm from Munster, which is, a stone's throw from Chicago. But Culver, funny story, actually. When I was in high school, I did speech and debate because why not? It's a fun thing to sort of keep me interested, and got me a podcast a decade later. But or at least I was invited to join a pod. But the first speech and debate tournament I went to was at Culver Academy, and if you guys have never been there, and this is where Trey Galloway goes to high school, it is the real life reenactment, non-fictional version of Hogwarts. I mean, there are just gorgeous buildings everywhere to be seen, big trees. You almost would have bet that Harry Potter was filmed there, but you would have thought Quidditch was the number one sport instead of basketball or football. So it's kind of, and funny thing is, I thought all the other high schools in the state of Indiana were like this because this is my first meet. I was like, wow, man, this Munster place is kind of a dump. But no, it's I soon found out that Culver was more the exception, not the rule. But, Leal and Galloway, 6'4", 6'5" shooting guards, interesting profiles, very, very, appealing to recruit to. But as you kind of touched on there, Noah, we've got 2019 guys that can make an immediate impact next season. And, after Harlan Beverly committed to Miami and, we were able to finally digest the Joey Brunk commitment, I spent about 10, 15 minutes YouTubing Lester Quinones, and I understand that he's not exactly, it's always hard to project high school highlights into college basketball or even the next level, but that guy can shoot the basketball. He sets up his shots beautifully. He knows how to take it to the rim. And the news came down earlier today that he has IU in his Final Four. So, when that announcement comes down on May 10th, I'm going to be looking forward to seeing where he chooses. Trendon Watford, obviously very attractive option as well, being the brother Christian Watford and a highly regarded recruit. So all these things, they're all kind of floating around in the air, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out.
Yep, and speaking of playing out, we're getting a lot closer. For Trendon, it could be any day now because, like we talked about last week, he told Rivals.com that if he doesn't do it the week of April 28th or April 30th, so that is this week, then he's probably going to do it the first week of May, which is next week. So Trendon could be literally any day, just to whenever he physically decides to do it, however he wants to do it. Be on the lookout for that, especially if maybe he announces, oh, I'm going to announce like Friday at my high school or something like that. Just be on the lookout. And of course, it's going to blow up on Twitter whenever anything like that comes out with Trendon. But just as a recap, Alabama, LSU, Indiana, Memphis are his Final Four schools for that. Speaking of Lester as well, I think there have been inklings the past week. When we talked about him more in depth last Tuesday, it was, and it still is, but it's still very heavily in Memphis's favor. But this past week, there have been inklings that Indiana is getting much higher on his board potentially than they were at least 7 days ago than what we thought. Again, most people think that Memphis is, and it probably is, the very strong front runner in that. But Indiana has gained some speed right at the end of the finish line, and at least for him, we know that his decision is going to be a hard date right on May 10th. He's figuring out where he wants to do that since his high school declined him from announcing during his high school, which is curious in itself. They might have the reasons, but why not get that publicity for your high school? Anyway, we don't have to dive into that. But May 10th, which is a week from this current Friday, and he's having an in-home visit with Archie this Thursday. I don't remember what other days he's doing in-home visits from with the other schools, but this week he's basically having in-home visits from all of his final schools. Archie's coming in on Thursday, kind of your last second push, final words, so that he can decide next week. So next Tuesday we could still have both Lester and Trendon not committed yet, but in 2 weeks from today, when we do our normal podcast, you would think both kids have committed to Indiana or elsewhere. So the 2019 high school recruits that are high on Indiana's board are winding down. And if we swing and hit, swing and miss, or a combination of the two, we'll have to see where we go from here compared to where our 2 scholarship spots will go and potential grad transfers, or if we try and get someone else, some lower recruited, lower project kind of person. But of course, Twitter will keep you updated. We'll just break it down when it comes Tuesday, unless we get both people and we do like an emergency podcast or something at the same time. So let's go into some baseball talk, because they are definitely worth mentioning. Of course, we'll talk about football and basketball the most, and I think those are the sports that the majority of people are interested in. But the baseball team really needs some love this week, because they are just doing they're just doing wonders, honestly, especially with first-year coach Jeff Mercer. So this past week, after winning their series against Minnesota 2-1, their rankings in just a few of them, because rankings in other sports are not as clear-cut as football and basketball. It's not, you don't really have 1 or 2 rankings. Like for basketball, you get the AP and then the coaches poll that really were the official rankings. And it's a little different that there are more rankings, but for baseball, some of the rankings that have come out recently for IU, the USA Today coaches poll has them at 22nd right now. Fansided has them at 21st. D1baseball.com has them at 19th. So they've gotten themselves into the top 25, and they're continuing to climb up every week. I've seen that they've continually climbed up. It's because they've also won 7 straight series. Again, not seven straight games, 7 straight series that they've won. And that came off recently their 2-1 series win against Minnesota this past weekend. That, of course, if you haven't seen or heard, which hopefully you have done both, that full count walk-off 3-run home run on Saturday to beat Minnesota, which, of course, probably made national top 10 sports plays and everything, which was just really cool to see. Their overall record right now is 30-14, but they're 28-10 after starting off the year slow 2-4. So they're really coming into their own. And honestly, I'm going to attribute that slow start just to literally having a new coach, which is okay. It's what happens with everyone. They're 11-4 in the conference. They're second only behind Michigan by only 1 game, which coincidentally they're going to play next weekend. They play Illinois this coming weekend. They've got a one game against Kentucky next Tuesday. Then they're going to face Michigan. So a lot of big games coming up for IU and after they play Michigan in a 3-game series, they will host a top 10 ranked Louisville for 1 game that Tuesday right after. So they're finishing the season strong against highly ranked opponents as they try and go into the NCAA baseball tournament. So let's start with Matt. What are your? It doesn't have to be too long, but what are your just thoughts, noticings, anything with the baseball team as of recent?
They like to hit the long ball. Of course, I think I've mentioned that before on the podcast, but they're actually clutch. They've had a multiple walk-off winning games as of recently, and they've been winning close games, which is really important come tournament time. So, yeah, look for baseball to make a run. I do think that it helps that the Big Ten is kind of meh this year. Like normally the Big Ten's pretty decent at baseball. I think this year it's not as good as it has been in previous years, but you can't blame us for beating the competition in front of us. So
yeah, exactly. And we'll also get a better look. Like you said, maybe some of the competition isn't the cream of the crop, but the next 2 weeks we'll get to actually see that after they face number 1 Big Ten ranked Michigan and then top 10 ranked Louisville. So we'll get to see their chops after they face Illinois this weekend. But what about you, Nathan? I know you are very into baseball.
I'm into everything, man. Look, you mentioned the schedule coming up. I mean, Kentucky and Illinois aren't that shabby either, especially when you consider you're facing Illinois on the road for a weekend series. Look, if you're in Bloomington,
you have to think of Illinois as they also have other sports besides football and basketball. So don't think of Illinois as the bottom of the Big Ten necessarily in other sports.
Right. Well, and in fact, that Illinois program's been close to the top of the conference in recent years. They've turned out MLB draft, first round, second round prospects. They've made the NCAA baseball tournament. So they're no joke by any means. And look, if you're in Bloomington, definitely go watch this team. They've got, like you mentioned, a handful of big games coming up. You get that home game against Louisville, the series against Rutgers. If you can't make it to the games because you're not in Bloomington or for whatever reason, you can catch these guys on TV. That's not very commonplace for teams that are not in the SEC. Or maybe the Pac-12. And this IU baseball team is going to be featured on ESPNU twice in the remaining regular season games. The game on the 10th, a Friday night at Michigan, will be on ESPNU. The home game against Louisville will be on ESPNU, and that's rare. I mean, those guys don't televise too many college baseball games. And like I mentioned, especially outside of the SEC. And the Hoosiers also face in the Sunday game against Michigan is also on Big Ten Network. The Big Ten tournament will also be on the Big Ten Network, and that's before the NCAA baseball tournament, where if these things continue to stand, where IU's a top 25 team, they should be in very good positioning to make the NCAA baseball tournament, which features 64 teams. So when you consider all the automatic conference champion berths, once you kind of get rid of those, IU baseball is definitely in a position to get a bid. They might, and this is a minimal percentage chance, but still possible, they might host the first round of the NCAA baseball tournament, which means they'll be one of the top 16 seeds. Again, it's a low percentage of that happening, but you can kind of do the math in your head. If the top 16 seeds gets to host the first weekend, IU right now hovering sort of in the 19 through 22, 23 range, with a couple of big wins, with a number of big wins coming up, which they have a chance to get. That's definitely possible. But I'll tell you this, if you like action-packed offense, power baseball, this is your team. They've blown away, previous seasons as far as home run totals go. Guys like Grant Richardson and Matt Lloyd and Matt Gorski are smoking the ball. So this team provides a lot of fun, and with the weather sort of getting better and better, you should definitely go check them out.
Mm-hmm. Now, you can't check them out the next few games. They're at Illinois, they're at Kentucky, and then at Michigan. So there's they're literally 2 weeks from today is the first time that you'll get to go back home to see them against Louisville, but then they'll finish their entire series home against Rutgers. So this weekend at Illinois, next weekend at Michigan, weekend after at home against Rutgers, and then that's the end of their regular season before, like Nathan said, Big Ten tournament into the NCAA tournament. And you mentioned this, the NCAA tournament for baseball, it more or less mimics a lot of what the basketball NCAA tournament is. So the bracket is somewhat the same with bids and everything getting in there. Now, of course, it functions just a little differently with, like you said, host sites hosting things. And also it's not at the entire tournament is not a one game elimination thing, but just keep updated with them. And again, echoing everything Nathan said, they're on TV, so keep watching some of them. BTN's given them a lot of love, so catch some of those games, especially the next couple of weekends, as a lot of the other sports start to slow down, because this past week there were two or three programs that shut down their season, as the spring season's starting to close out with finals this week, graduation this weekend, and one of yours truly, Matthew Lukens, will be walking on that stage on Saturday. So let's move on to who won the week. Now, honestly, you could probably talk about most of these subjects that we are discussing about winning the week. But Nathan, do you have anyone else who's won the week for this week in IU sports?
Yeah, and normally around this time we like to talk about someone outside of baseball or football. I'm sorry, basketball or football, and we already kind of touched on baseball earlier. So my choice is going to be Lily King, the famed swimmer at IU. She picked up a prestigious award. It's called the Honda Sport Award for swimming and diving. It's presented by the Collegiate Sports Awards Group. It's a very prestigious award presented annually to one of the top women athletes in the various NCAA sports, and King won the award for swimming and diving, and she gets now to be a finalist for the Collegiate Woman Athlete of the Year, which will be presented live on CBS Sports Network next a couple months from now on June 24th. IU has won this award a few times before. Most recently, Michelle Deckers won it for cross country in the late 80s. So you can kind of do the math. It's been about 30 years since a Hoosier has won this award. And I mean, it's completely deserved. All she's done is completely dominate the breaststroke event in swimming, both at the collegiate and the Olympic level. It's pretty cool to think that someone at IU's an Olympic champion, and she just keeps getting praise heaped upon her for her accomplishments.
Yeah, and I was thinking of that award specifically, and if she doesn't win the overall award for her swimming stuff, I honestly don't know what woman athlete is going to win for swimming ever if Lily King is not the person to win that kind of thing. So
tell him, Noah, right now.
Mm-hmm. I know we also wanted to give a shout out to the women's rowing team. They're ranked 16th in the nation right now. They finished 4th in the Longhorn Invitational over the past weekend. They're a really strong program. Of course, it's even hard to find news on them, but if you go to the Indiana Hoosier, the sports website, they give you some stuff up there. So check them out just to see how they're doing. Moving on to the NFL draft over the weekend. Now, the past few years, Indiana has had a few people drafted, actually, which I think Tom Allen is trying to change. And, of course, we're going to talk about recruits that are trying to change this. But we did, and I think this specific person was surprising because last week Matt and I came on here and said we doubt any Hoosier would get drafted, and I still stand by that. I was surprised by the one Hoosier that ended up being drafted. He was the lowest on all of the Indiana boards that anyone thought would be drafted, but lo and behold, Wes Martin, 4th round of the NFL draft at the 131st overall pick, the Washington Redskins took Wes Martin. And it's, like I said, 4th round. They probably could have gotten him in the 7th or if it was a free agent, but they saw something in him. They're ready to. They pulled the trigger, and just congratulations for him. That's great. He got a lot of Twitter love. Dwayne Haskins, also a recent Washington Redskins pick, even gave him a shout out as soon as he was drafted. So that's great to see. The last Hoosier to be drafted by the Skins was, in fact, Nate Studfeld. And Wes Martin getting drafted marks the 6th year a Hoosier has been drafted. So he continues the streak that Indiana right now is on for Hoosiers getting drafted. And that honestly is a streak. It seems like when you think about Ohio State and Alabama and those big guns, that'll have 4 or 5 people get drafted in the 1st round. But this past year, Nebraska and Tennessee, both historically really good football programs, did not have one person drafted the entire draft out of all 254 picks. Tennessee and Nebraska.
No, are you saying we're going to become Nebraska now? We're just going to take football away from them?
We're just going to take football. I mean, if you want to talk about historically football for Nebraska, then I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah. So I'll take some 9 and 7 seasons too.
Exactly.
I'll take that too. Yeah.
So that I think it is something to hang your hat on, especially as Indiana is transitioning coaches as well. So after that, there were some free agent pickups, which I think we all assumed there would be. Brandon Knight was the first to go. I think the Dallas Cowboys called him, and he's headed to the Cowboys for the. And Matt's giving funny looks because, of course, he's an Eagles fan. So Brandon Knight's headed to the Cowboys. Dan Godsoll got picked up by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jonathan Crawford to the Tennessee Titans. Real quick, Matt, who do you think has? Because of course, these are 93-man rosters, and they have to be chopped down by over 40 people. So, Matt, who do you think has the best shot of staying and playing when it comes August into September?
If I have to put money on it, it's Jonathan Crawford with the Tennessee Titans. I've always really liked Jonathan Crawford as a prospect. I think the Titans will realize that too and keep him. But yeah, that's my answer.
Interesting. I thought the answer was obvious, but I guess not. What do you think, Nathan?
Just to be clear.
Wait. I thought you meant of like the people that were like not drafted. Did you mean like
no? Just in general. Just in general. Out of all 4 of those guys.
Well, then of course it's Brandon Knight, or Wes Martin, not Brandon Knight. Wes Martin. Oh my God.
What do you think, Nathan? Before I give my opinion.
Oh man. So. Look, Wes Martin, like you said, the general consensus was that he was maybe a end of the draft candidate.
Not even.
Right. Then,
I'm on I work for a Steelers website who it's their job to do draft stuff, and this guy was not even trying to be mean. He was like, I didn't even have him on my offensive line board. I didn't know about him at all. That's how far down he was for a lot of national people.
Look, so obviously being the 4th round pick, Wes Martin will kind of get started with a bit of an advantage in the Washington camp. I'm curious about Brandon Knight. He's going to a team in Dallas that's had a really nice history recently of offensive line play. Guys like Zach Martin, and, among others, have really kind of gone crazy as far as being successful offensive linemen with the Cowboys. So if he can kind of, go under their wing during practices, during training camp, even if he doesn't necessarily succeed with the Cowboys because of other quality players, I could definitely see him catching on with another team and making some sort of impact. So it might be a bit of an underdog pick, but I think Brandon Knight's a guy to keep an eye out on.
Okay. Okay, so stay with Chris Covington, basically.
Yeah.
So Wes Martin in the fourth round bodes very well for him. The fourth round is still a round that no matter what your draft grade, your whatever grades were on you, your potential, anything, usually the fourth round is a round that teams will keep, even if you don't have a good training camp, just to see how you go through the year. I think it's safe to say fifth round and beyond. You're not safe. Of course, if you get drafted, it's better for you. But if you're a team that drafted 11 or 12 people, you're going to have to cut some of them. So I think fifth round and below, you're not necessarily safe, and then you still have to perform in training camps and everything. So of course, it's great for Wes. But I think the one guy you all didn't mention, and Matt, you mentioned him last week. You thought he has the best chance to make a roster and stay on a roster. So I guess you're flip-flopping your picks was Dan Gotzel, long snapper. And like we talked about last week, of course, he's not going to be ranked high because when you rank special teams compared to other people, they're in like the way hundreds into like the thousands, technically, even though that's actually not where they're ranked in terms of their own position. And there was a lot of talk on Twitter, especially when Gotzel was picked up by the Buccaneers, saying that he should have been drafted anyway, and he's a long snapper, and he's probably going to find a team and stay on a team. So if Wes is not that guy, my pick is going to be Dan Gotzel. I think he's got a good chance. And of course, I'm not a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fanatic, and I don't know many two ins and outs about that to know if they have a long snapper or not. But it is an important position. It really is. It's a spot on the roster, and there's always a long snapper that makes the 52. So congrats to those guys. Hopefully that they can make it out during training camps into the preseason and stuff, and just keep going, because of course the AAF fell through, so the XFL will, as it seems, everyone's going to predict is going to fall through as soon as it's over. So sad that a lot of these guys hopefully can just continue their football career. But speaking of more football, it's basically May, and we're talking a lot about football. This is great. Okay, so this is so far mostly this offseason, but recent IU football news. This is what's happened the past year and a half to 2 years, mainly the last month. First, fans were wanting cheaper ticket prices. The tickets are now cheaper. People wanted a new offensive coordinator. Indiana has a new offensive coordinator. In the last month alone, Jack Tuttle, his waiver was approved. A couple weeks later, the names were returned to the back of the uniform, something that most fans wanted. This weekend, Wes Martin was drafted in the fourth round. Yesterday, the Taliaferro statue was announced. Yesterday, 4-star wide receiver Sean Williams committed to the program. And today, which seems like it's not very big news, but it's big news to a lot of people, that alcohol sales are now announced at Memorial Stadium. So the past, I think, 2 years, there have been a lot of changes that fans have been calling for. And I think Fred Glass and Tom Allen and company for recruits and stuff have now checked off every single box. Oh, the stadium renovations as well. I forgot to add that in. Stadium renovations have checked off every single box to try and get this football program on the right track and getting better, which I think started yesterday, continued at least yesterday with the signing of Rashawn Williams. If you hadn't heard, 6'1", 185-pound, 4-star wide receiver out of Detroit, Michigan for the class of 2020. Rashawn Williams signed with Indiana University, becoming the highest rated recruit for Indiana football to get, which is the second straight year after Samson James was that player last year. Rashawn Williams eclipses Samson James' recruiting ranking this year. His 24/7 Sports composite rating is .9241, and it's just great for Tom Allen and the Indiana staff. This guy is about a top 200 player in the overall rankings. Right now, his official spot is fluctuating just because yesterday he was 175. Today he's 200. Tomorrow he could be 150 just because this time of year it moves up and down. But he's about a top 200 player, which you don't see at all ever in Indiana. Top 300 is basically like getting a top 100 level basketball player.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And he's about the 30th best wide receiver overall for the class of 2020. And when it came down to it, Indiana beat out Purdue, West Virginia, Syracuse, and Cincinnati. And I think putting in there a team like West Virginia, where we beat out West Virginia, is something to start. We're starting to beat some of those other schools, beat out Ohio State-ish for Samson James, that Tom Allen's starting to get in the conversation for these recruits and beating out other schools. So a lot of stuff about Rashawn Williams, but let's start with you, Matt. Just I think it's just easier to say, just talk about your thoughts about Rashawn Williams and coming to Indiana.
Look, I mean, I don't think it's far enough to say that Tom Allen's probably the best recruiter in the history of IU football. I don't think it's early to say that. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that right now. 2 straight years we've had our best recruit ever sign for us or commit to us. Now, I am very pessimistic and slightly worried about him decommitting, but because that happens a lot more in college football than it does in college basketball. Decommitments happen all the time. But if he does stay, Samson James decommitted from Ohio State and committed to us. So, I mean, it can work in our favor. It can work against us. So hopefully he stays. But as a wide receiver prospect, going against Tywan Mullen every day in practice in 2 years, like, these guys are going to make each other better.
His brother just got drafted.
Right. His brother just got drafted in the first or early second round.
Brother or cousin? I don't want to say that incorrect. Was
brother.
Brother. Okay.
His brother. But yeah, I mean, those two going against each other in practice is going to be, one, legendary, and two, make their team way better. And then we have quarterback prospects. We named Tuttle. We haven't even talked about Penix. And we have Peyton Ramsey, who's still remarkably was he a sophomore? He
will be a junior. He'd be a senior, redshirt senior when if Rashawn Williams came into the program.
Right. He's a 2-year starter, and now he's a junior. Like, guys, our offense is, and we have a new offensive coordinator that isn't Mike DeBoer. God bless. Like, the outlook for Indiana football, has it ever been brighter? I'm not sure. Definitely since I've been alive.
I say at least recently.
Yeah, like in the last, I'm gonna date everybody, but I am almost 22 years old. So the last 22 years, I look through the history of IU football. I don't think I've seen a more promising time, and we know the defense is going to be there because Tom Allen's got the defense going, so that's fine. And this is like what we have, like 3 or 4 commits in the class of 2020 right now. Like, we still have like another 15, 16, 17 guys that are going to commit. We're looking at maybe possibly the best class IU has had, and we might even get better recruits than the wide receiver from Michigan. So, like, I am so excited. Also, I'm going to talk about the stadium and alcohol in it. I have been clamoring for this since I got to IU, since I have gone to stadiums where they sell alcohol in the Big Ten, mainly Purdue, and seen how rowdy and peppy their crowd is, and how they stay longer, even when the game is kind of tough, and more people go to games. So yeah, if you think any of that's bad, if any of that is bad, I'm going to have to disagree with you. And I don't think we can be friends. I would like to see us like have our own distillery or like brewery, or own like beer, kind of like Purdue does, so we can make a little bit more money off of it and then put that back towards the football program. That would be great. But I guess this is kind of a pilot run. And then it'll be interesting to see if it goes to Assembly Hall, because imagine IU basketball game with give or take 40% of the crowd drunk. I feel like that'd be wonderful. Anyways, but that's just my personal opinion. Anyways, How about you, Nathan?
Well, first of all, I just have to say, I liked a lot of what you said about Rashawn Williams there, Matt. After Williams announced his decision on Twitter, at least that's where I found it, one of our Indiana HQ contributors, Cody, put together a really nice article about Rashawn Williams, his choice, his background. There are a bunch of video highlights if you want to see the different traits that Williams will bring to the wide receiver room starting in 2020. I would definitely recommend reading that article. There's a lot of just detail. It mentions how it's pretty cool, right? That when Williams is a freshman, both Jack Tuttle and Michael Penix will be redshirt sophomores. So you're talking about 3 years where those guys will all be together, continuing to get better and better and better. And that's exactly the kind of thing a successful college football program needs. So I would definitely go recommend reading that article. Again, it's indianahq.com. Just search, Rashawn Williams. You'll see it on the homepage right there. Highly recommended. As far as the alcohol thing goes at Memorial Stadium, I remember talking to Blake Betzner, our football contributor, a few weeks ago on this podcast, and we were just saying, like, will winning bring the fans to IU football games, or will fans coming to IU football games help the team win? And we just kind of went back and forth on that. And I was not expecting Fred Glass and the IU athletics department to come down with this decision earlier today on Tuesday with, we're going to sell alcohol at the IU football games. Will this be the answer? I don't know. But I'm telling you something, if the first game of the 2019 season when IU takes on Eastern Illinois, the first home game, the first game's a neutral site game against Ball State in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. But if games against Eastern Illinois or UConn, or, looking down the road, home games against, just your non-rival teams like Rutgers or Maryland or whatever. If this brings more people to Memorial Stadium and keeps people at the games, I think there will be a direct correlation with more wins on the field. And I can't wait to see how this develops. I'll be honest, like, Matt, we all went to IU. Yeah. There are football fans left, right, and center on campus. People love football. They talk about fantasy football, NFL, Colts, Bears, whatever. It's just for whatever reason, when you watch IU football games, it's a half empty crowd. And that's where I think Fred Glass eventually said, look, this might be a last resort, but we're going to give this a shot. And hey, maybe 10 years from now, we look back on this day as the day where IU football became like IU basketball in terms of attendance at the games and in terms of just hostility in the crowd. I mean, Memorial Stadium's the second smallest stadium in the Big Ten, right after Northwestern. So, let's see if this makes a major impact on the field.
Yeah, they were talking about a high school football stadium in Texas that was built for 60,000 people, and I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing. There's a high school stadium bigger than
everything's bigger in Texas.
I know, but still, it's a high school. Anyway, I agree with most of everything of what you guys said. The only thing that I might tweak a little bit with Matt's is the recruiting, just jumping in right away, saying it's the best recruiting, and there's no doubt. I'm not taking anything away from Tom Allen and all of his recruiting stuff recently. The only thing that, of course, we're going to have to see is that translate to the football field. We're going to have to start seeing some wins. But in addition to that, it's hard to see because the last few years, Indiana football recruiting has gotten better. It statistically, ratings, rankings, all of that, it has gotten so much better. But the rest of the Big Ten is getting a lot better. We're starting to take some of the guys that the SEC just literally just took day in and day out all the time. The Big Ten is starting to get better recruits, and at least Indiana recruiting is not staying stagnant or declining. It is going with everyone, but they're not improving in the Big Ten. They're still staying about 10th or 11th or 12th in the Big Ten. So hopefully we can continue that. Hopefully, like you guys talked about, Rashawn Williams is not going to be the only top level recruit that we can get in. I'm not sure we're going to get a kid in the class of 2020 that's going to be higher than he. I was looking at some of the people Indiana are interested in, and he is not by far, but he was definitely the highest rated recruit that Indiana was even looking at. So I guess we'll see there. But for the alcohol sales, I wanted to read Fred Glass's statement if you didn't get to see it. So what he said himself was, quote, "Our main goals with this initiative are to enhance the game day experience," what Nathan was talking about, "for our fans and reduce alcohol-related incidents in and around the stadium. While there will be some comparatively modest revenue generated by these sales, that is not going to be the primary purpose of this program. 10% of our net beer and wine public sales revenue will be given to the campus for alcohol safety programming." A couple things. When I first heard about this, I knew that this was good news for most Indiana fans and just for people getting in seats. But I did like the kind of twist that Fred Glass was putting on it, how first 10% of all of that is going back to alcohol safety, because that was obviously and is probably the main and almost only reason why colleges that do or don't have alcohol sold at these sports events is because of the safety reasoning, and students may be trying to use fake IDs and all that kind of stuff. And they're partnering with this company to try and look into statistics and everything and stuff. And they were finding that programs that do sell alcohol at the stadium, those alcohol related incidents, those negative related incidents were decreased if they sold it at the stadium. It decreased for Ohio State by actually 65%. And then they also talked about, what was the other one? It was like, I don't think it was Maryland. Maybe it was Purdue or something. It was like 30. No, West Virginia. It was 35% that it decreased. So they were finding that it was at least worth it to try it. And like you said, try this pilot program to try and just see how it goes. Because I don't think this is necessarily set in stone, but I also think it is kind of set to see how it goes. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see if it backs up concessions or something like that, because that was a concern at the end of the year this year, I heard, with the food just being a little slow at concessions and stuff. So, but I think the main one of the other points I wanted to mention was with what you guys were saying. I think Fred Glass and Tom Allen are also just working together a lot to try and get this football program back, well, not necessarily, well, in some respects back to being really good, and then also getting back to a national scale. And so because of course the names on the back of the jerseys, I was indifferent to that. Most fans wanted to have the names on the back of the jersey, but if Tom Allen was and I'm not saying this was, but if he was the one coming in saying, I want to take the names off, and Fred Glass was like, okay, why, blah, 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 they took the names off. Either one or both of the parties are talking to each other. It didn't seem to excite the fans that the names were off the jersey, so let's change it. Let's fix it again. Alcohol sales. I don't know if whoever it was, it probably was Tom Allen to say, hey, let's think about this. Can we talk about this and try and make it a better fan experience? The stadium renovations were before Tom Allen, but again, I think now we're not seeing the money pour into the program just yet, but I think all the little details are starting to click that Fred Glass and Tom Allen and his staff are starting to care that the fans want to try and help and support this program. Tom Allen's doing his job getting the recruits to start coming in. He's going to, I think, and hope, we're going to see this year, it's going to be a big year for him this year, that the level of play on the field is going to start changing. Since last year, he was a very young team. Let's see what he can do with the development of those young players. And then all those extra little stuff like we talked about. What I talked about in April, how we had so many off-season things that were just exciting for IU football. Matt talked for probably a minute to 2 minutes about how excited he was for Indiana football straight, which is, when you think about it, almost a little funny. So this is just great for Indiana football. And people are just excited, like you said, Matt, and it's nice to be excited for. I do think the Ball State neutral site game is great for just the state of Indiana in general, so Indianapolis can get something. I think there's a lot of cool things going on. It's just not the stale year in and year out same kind of stuff. So
I personally, about the whole Ball State Indiana thing, I'd like to see kind of like a Crossroads Classic, but in football, and have Notre Dame and Purdue and IU and Ball State play, and then switch it up and then do IU, Notre Dame, and Purdue, Ball State, and do it every other year.
Notre Dame dominate everyone. So
I said I did not finish my complete thought, which was when we get better, then maybe look at down the road doing that in like the 2027s, like what, when you get into the football scheduling realm, they schedule games in advance, like 9 years down the road. So I'm just saying, maybe we look at the way the program is trending. We look at the way the other programs, the Big Ten, are trending and go, I think this year will be somewhat decent and we can play Notre Dame and maybe give them a shot. And hopefully the Big Ten will be a lot worse than it is right now, so that we won't, automatically have 4 losses on our schedule. But you never know. But what I'm saying is it's good for IU to play national teams. Notre Dame is a national team, is an in-state team. I'm sure a bunch of IU fans would be heartbroken having to watch their beloved Notre Dame and IU football play each other. Whoops, did I say that? I'm sorry. Anyways,
for now, let's just trade out Notre Dame for Indiana State, and then we'll be good. That'll be a good Crossroads Classic.
State, are they even Division I football? Do they even have a Division I football team?
We've played them a few times. I remember beating the Sycamores. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. That's fine.
All right. Any last second thoughts, Nathan?
No, I mean, well, just remember, overall though, like the last few years, IU football's been close, right? They're not generally getting obliterated by teams in a very tough division. It's not like Ohio State's beaten IU by 5 touchdowns every year. Same thing with Michigan State, Penn State. I mean, IU's definitely on the radar of those teams. They know not to take IU lightly. So whether it's a policy change to bring last names back to the back of the jerseys, maybe that gets you a couple of recruits that 2 or 3 or 4 years later make that big tackle on 3rd and 8 to beat Penn State. Or, if it means, selling alcohol at games keeps another 10, 15, 20,000 fans at Memorial Stadium to cause a false start, for Michigan State and help IU win a game. These little tweaks can make a difference over the course of 2, 3, 4 seasons. And, IU's right there. I guess I would hope. I think one thing that would really help the program is that you get Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State out of IU's division. That's what I would vote for.
I was about to say, I want to leave this thought with everyone with what Jim Delaney said, that he's entertaining the idea of taking the divisions away. That's the last piece of the puzzle for Indiana football. If we could take the divisions away, man, look out. But
yes. True.
That about wraps it up for our 86th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support, especially that live audience. I or one of us will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. Make sure you guys stay tuned through updates on Twitter. Visit our website, indianahq.com, and subscribe so you can get all of those episodes right to your phone. Send us your questions as the audience so we can get them on our next episode. Most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is how we grow this podcast so we can reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But, as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace. Sorry I'm dumb.